who could we think of? And Marion's name came up, and so I called her up and said, we'd like to nominate you for the play Populous. And she accepted. The next morning, at a disgustingly early hour, like 8 a.m. or so, she called me up, oh my God, and she said, I'm sorry, but I really have to decline. This whole notion of poet and populist, it has nothing to do with poetry, nothing to do with being a poet, and as flattered and honored as I am, I just can't do something I don't believe in. And so I just would like to tell that story to attest to her ethical sense as a working poet. I'll read a little bit more from Mr. Beckett, and then that'll be it. Times when she is gone, long lapses of time, that crocus time we'll be making for the distant tune, to have that on the imagination, on top of the rest, bearing by the stem around her arm across her wreath, but she can be gone at any time, from one moment of the year to the next, suddenly no longer there, no longer anywhere to be seen, nor by the eye of flesh, nor by the other, then is suddenly there again, long after, so on. Any other would renounce, avow, not one, no one more, any other than this other, and wait for her to reappear, in order to resume the, what is the word? What the wrong word? She is there, again. Let the eye from its vigil be distracted a moment, at break or close of day, distracted by the sky, by something in the sky, so that when it resumes, the curtain may no longer be closed, opened by her to let her see the sky. But even without that, she is there, without the curtains being opened, suddenly open, a flash, the suddenness of it all. She's still without stopping, on her way without starting, gone without going, back without returning. Suddenly it is evening, or dawn. The eye rivets the bare window. Nothing in the sky will distract from it more, while she from within looks filled. Gently, gently, careful. Decision no sooner reached, or rather long than after, what is the wrong word? For the last time at last, for to end yet again, what the wrong word? Then revoked. No, but slowly dispelled a little, very little, like the last wisps of day when the curtain closes, of itself by slow millimeters or drawn by a phantom hand. Farewell to farewell. Then in that perfect dark foreknell, darling sound fit for end begun. First, last moment. Grant only enough remain to devour all, moment by moment. Sky, earth, the whole kit and boodle, not another crumb of carrion left. The chops and basta, no, one moment more, one last. Grace to breathe that void, no happiness. Wally, sit.
Wally. All right.
Happy one.
Well, now everybody here knows Marion was quite the musician, and she opened her readings with her voice and this chanting and this percussion. And the only word that comes to mind is racing. And very inspiring. She was ready to read, she was ready to get your attention. All I can say is Marion is an incredibly positive spirit, and I was really fortunate to get to know her. All of us were, and I kind of think I want you folks know, she was very much aware of how much she was loved and appreciated by the Red Sky community. So many of you really loved and appreciated her when she was alive. I think that's something you should feel good about. One thing I wanted to say, and another was something thing that sticks in my mind. My last time I saw her, I played a gig out at the Sunset Tavern a few years ago. It's kind of a sort of hipster club out in Ballard. An East Coast guy was in town. It's a fairly early gig. True to form of these clubs nowadays, there's never anywhere to sit, so everybody's standing up. And it was fairly early, and I get ready to play, and I look out, not too far away, seated amongst a bunch of 20-somethings, 30-somethings, was Marion and Margaretta.
And Shirley.
And Shirley, that's right. And needless to say, those were the hippest people in the world.
Played like a dream.
And so anyway, it was just remarkable. There's Marion, and this wasn't that long ago. It was just so long. And anyway, a few years ago, I think maybe it was her 70th birthday, we did Godfellas Hall. You might ask, I played the blues for Marion, and Marion liked it, and that's all that mattered. So I'm going to play one for Marion.
I'm always late.
Skeleton, if you be out of order, I am ruined. These bony feet and hands, my clicking neck, this jaw for sustenance, this delicate sea-worn ear, you cranium, my shield, and the kinky, cranky spine, think of the knee, Imagine electrical designs that spark us and how we betray that which serves us in everything, this living machine. But the benevolent sun continues to enter this diluvian shelf, the sidewalk, my bones. To other suns, it is nothing, but to me, machine beyond machines, everything runs on that power. It's from Machines, which I had the honor of publishing. It's illustrated by a really great guy, George Morris Jr. Anyway, I only brought the one copy. I do have a couple, so if anybody is really interested, get a hold of me. This is really hard. Marion was my colleague, my friend and advisor, my neighbor for almost 25 years, and for a short time, my tenant, as some of you heard the stories on the procession, for some property that I managed, none owned. I want to tell you a story that probably not many of you know, unless you were around Red Sky in the summer of 1982. Any of you who remember the bingo hall? Nice, big, spacious place. They decided to remodel the Soames Dunn building, and that meant we had to move. Marion had started coming to the readings there, and I have some very vague memories of her reading. As most of my memories of that period are kind of vague, but some are very clear. It was a really important time in my life because I made some major changes, and I learned that Marion had too. Anyway, so we had to move out of the bingo hall, and Don Wilson, father, Red Sky, Marion was the mother, but Don was the father. He got to the PDA where he knew everybody and arranged for us to meet in the PDA meeting room, which was probably about half or a third the size of this. After the bingo hall, it was like being in a cubicle. It was so little. We went from meeting in the market on Sundays at 2 when the market was closed and it was quiet, and there were a few merchants open, but you know, you could go down and buy a 6-pack of beer at the market and whatnot, but there wasn't much going on. Then we moved into the PDA meeting room, and so we had to be there when the PDA was open. So we started meeting at 12 o'clock on Saturday afternoons, which you can imagine was a lot different. That was a big deal to me because I had started volunteering with Red Sky, which meant basically help clean up. You went to meetings and put your 2 cents in. Anyway, so Joe Kepler asked me if I would help him run the series when we were in the PDA because everybody else was working, it was my day off, and he needed another pair of hands, and I'm like, absolutely. So we did that a couple of weeks, and then Joe calls me up and says, I can't make it. I don't know what the reason was, but he wasn't going to be there. He says, you've got to do it all on your own. And oh, by the way, the feature canceled.
By the way.
But he said, if you get there and Marion Kimes is there, you could ask her to feature. So that was Marion Kimes' first feature at Red Sky.
Wow.
I remember Marion used to wear a big floppy hat, and I asked her one day where she got it, how she came across it, and she told me it had belonged to her father, and she was very attached to it, and she mourned when she lost that hat. She never did figure out what happened. She left it somewhere, someone liked it too much and walked away with it, or whatever, but And I talked to her after my mother passed away, about a year later. My dad, who was in his 90s, he had broken up with his girlfriend. And so they were going to move somewhere, and that fell through. So instead of moving into a mobile home with his girlfriend, which I was totally fine with. I mean, if a guy in the 90s has his girlfriend, hey, you know. But instead of doing that, he moved into a motel and was living in this motel, cooking on a hot plate, and my whole family was just like ballistic because he was in his 90s, living in a motel, and you know, it's like everybody wanted him to come live with them, or you know, at least move nearby or whatever. And I was telling Marion this one day, and she said, you know, you just gotta let him do what he wants to do. She said, people criticize me for not taking care of my dad, but my dad wanted to live by himself. And he wanted to do what he wanted to do, when he wanted to do it, the way he wanted to do it. I said, you gotta let him do that. That was the best advice she ever gave me, because I did. My dad lived to be 106 years old. He did finally come to live with us, because at 102 he lost his driver's license. So Marion's loss is the loss of a dear friend, but I see her in all your faces. I see her here in this room, in the red sky. And someone said a few minutes ago that Marion didn't talk about her family much. Red sky was Marion's family.
Yes.
Red sky was always her family. And as much as we miss her, she will always be with us. Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, Trudy.
Of all the people that I was privileged to meet on that sky, Marion was characterized as the most consistently kind and the most consistently courteous. The first time I remember Marion was when she was an MC at the next venue beyond the one that Trudy just mentioned, down the Soup and Salad, where Trudy was working at the time. And she was her task to introduce a man who needed no introduction, who also was one of us who's passed on, Roberto Valenza. And she was up there just a little bit too long for Roberto, because Roberto said, "You're crowding my aura." And Marion looked kind of flummoxed by that. She was not somebody who exhibited that much ego. She didn't need to. She was content to have a community of which she was one of many centers. And I think the thing that I valued most about her, beside her surprising verse, was that willingness to let everybody be. But she had iron in her soul. She had iron in her soul. She was also, she's somewhat surprising. I've heard her referred to as the mother of Red Sky. Well, I don't know about you people, but I don't like to think about my mother having sex. But you know, she trot out something like this at the open mic. She didn't have to be the feature. She'd come up and she'd read a poem with this title. Penis sleeping like a seahorse, hollow below the lowest rib, who had her own rivers. You want to stir up my erotic? send me out there on the ledge to teeter back and forth, edging along just this side of pure air? Capitalized words don't work. Nudity, abandon, lust. Rather, small tremblers rouse, slurred words, a sentence softly trailing off, 2 lines pulled from some new poem. Laughter. That last one, just now, or aftershocks. No dessert to follow dinner, nothing on TV tonight, leaning to turn on flamenco. There we are, unbuttoning, eyes alight. She was full of surprises. So, you know, I don't live here anymore, and I don't come back very often, but I came back for what I thought I knew. I thought I knew the purpose when I came back here, but Grace just pointed out to me that this wasn't a coincidence. She said, Marion wanted you here. Mistress of the long vowel at the line's end. Mistress of the drum. Your croak and drawl live on.
Oh, Steve Potter. I wasn't.
Where is he? Where? Oh, there he is. So I'm gonna read one by Marion and then one for Marion that I think go together pretty well. In Death Hollow Wilderness. Think animals. Could we crawl, swim, fly? What animal would we be? Scales, shells, feathers, fur. And the animals, how many would befriend us? Think on breath, pull and blow, bark and moan. Could we sing if we slip from land to sea? Turn to great white Arctic bear, paws equal in skill and grace to any hook or worm. Loping along, beaching the desert, bedding the beach, fairly flying along the ancient dried-up lake. Bones and heat, dug home the sandy hole. Lay it in, lay it high, leaf, twig, feather, sky. Every ostrich, every kangaroo, bobcat, silence and seeing. Pointed ears low to the ground, hearing every savage cry. Justice, not blood. In the film poster's words, we want justice, not blood. We want justice, not blood. Wandering Box Hollow Canyon, primeval Slick Rock Canyon, Sand Creek, Calf Creek, Steep Creek, the wild corridors, Hell's Backbone, Lonesome Beaver, Tarantula Mesa, Pounsagonnet Plateau, Death Hollow Wilderness. Could we crawl, swim, fly? Could we trade jeans? Would we ask snakes' tongues or snakeskin shedders, red-hot 12-key camera-ready minds? Make sure our skins hold the sun this time? Run, leap, run legs, dancing hips, fins and feet? Could we trade jeans? What would we? In a box, Death Hollow, Wilderness Run. Lift us up, leaping up Calf Creek Falls, full of eggs, full of eggs, full of eggs. Were you one of the ones who noticed? Among the prancing peacocks, grant-chasing grackles, spotlight-stealing starlings, clever crows, cooing doves, squawking hawks, and strutting cocks of the walk, there was a little sparrow, singular and rare, who sang a sweet sparrow song with a Texas twang. often overlooked among the bigger birds in our vast aviary. Yes, there was a little sparrow, singular and rare, who poemed and rattled and chanted and sang a sweet sparrow song with a Texas twang, and who feathered a nest for all of us. Were you one of the ones who noticed? You were. Of course you were. You are here today among us.
Thank you. Hi, it's been so long since I've met poetry. And I think that it's a testament to Marion's spirit that there's so many amazing people in this room today. I'm like humbled and honored and happy. She was a consummate performer, and it's easy to forget that when you're just casually chatting with her. I think the only person I can compare her to is PJ Harvey. I don't know if anybody's seen PJ Harvey, but PJ Harvey is another one of those people who was tiny, but when she opened her mouth, this bigness came out, this big voice and these huge insights. I first saw Marion read in 1994 at Cafe Lena in Portland. Red Sky Poetry had sent a contingent down, and I was a new poet. And I was blown away, and I was very shy. I know that's hard to imagine now. So shy. I think I might have actually talked to Margaret Waterman at that reading. And I may have. In my goodbye to Portland reading, I actually wrote a poem where I was going to go be a red sky poet. But I didn't bring a poem today, but I did bring a story. Back when we were running the Seattle Poetry Festival, we had these little spin-off events at the now closed Speakeasy Cafe, and they were called Poetry and Cinema. And we would show these really wacky video poems, and we would bring in somebody who was not from the poetry community, but we'd always bring somebody who we thought was, could hold it down in the poetry realm, just solid. And our first reading, we had Marion Clems as our center. And she did a couple things that blew my mind because I'm not very thoughtful about certain things. So first, the flowers. I would never have thought of flowers. So she came in carrying these gigantic armfuls of fennel blossoms. And they smell like licorice. And I mean, I don't think I've met a plant in my life at that point. And I was like, what am I doing? And then who else was on the bill? So Slim Moon from Kill Rock Stars Records and Marion. And then, so she brought these fennel. They were bigger than me by far, definitely bigger than her. And she opened the set by singing opera, and she just blew me away. And at the end of the night, Bob Redmond and I packed the fennel up in a very tiny Toyota Corona and drove it home. And in the morning, when we went to take the fennel out, a spider had been in there, and it completely covered the entire car with spider webs. So that was a gift from Marion, and it's funny because spider has become sort of a thing for me. But the last thing I'll say, because there's so many people here who are so much closer to Marion than I was, she read with an ecstasy but not an urgency, and it was something I could learn from as a young, easily flummoxed slam poet. Really inspired me to keep going through that seminal phase where you're just angry or working through whatever. She just led by example all the time. But after that reading, and Paul Hunter, I don't remember where we were, but I do remember that she turned to you, and because Slim Moon from Kill Rock Star Records was on the bill, she said, well, some of us, Paul, get to read with rock stars. And with that, I leave it to McHutchinson.
We are here. It is now. And so many generations of Red Sky poets here. It's kind of I walked into Red Sky in 1983. And whew, my own little dark self, just very little bit of light permeating out. So,
I like the dark view.
yes, well, so I chose to read this little poem from the Sky Views from the Alternative to Loud Boats of Marion. That's after The Mask of the Red Death, after The Color Lithograph by Federico Castellan. We were born out of the mouths of crows.